On today's episode of Locked On Wild, if Jason Robertson really is available, we'll tell you why Bill Guerin needs to make that call.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we're going to talk about this Jason Robertson situation. Dallas is in a bit of a mess right now with everything that happened at the end of the season. And turns out their cap situation is a little messy as well. So we're going to take a look at that and whether or not Jason Robertson may actually be on the block. Could it be possible? We'll discuss, as well as taking a look at just how tangible having a cup winner on your team is as far as leadership goes. And we'll finish the show by taking a look at a former Wild killer looking to return to the NHL and why it's not a good idea for the Wild to get involved whatsoever. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, host of Seth on Sports on KTOE in Mankato, and credentialed media member as well. And we're starting off talking about a division rival here. The Dallas Stars find themselves in a bit of a messy situation. So let's get caught up. Let's get you up to speed. Obviously, there was the controversial decision to pull Jake Oettinger in what ended up being the deciding game against the Edmonton Oilers, Game 6. Oettinger was pulled because he gave up 2 goals on the first 2 shots of the game. Pete DeBoer elected to try to give his team a little bit of a jump start by shaking up the lineup. He talked after the game. Now, I know the big quote that was widely circulated was the receipt pull. DeBoer saying Oettinger has lost 6 out of his last 7 games against the Edmonton Oilers. And he said that's a large sample size, which isn't. But also, the entire quote, DeBoer did say that he didn't certainly put all of it on Jake Oettinger. He was trying to look for a spark. Even still, you can't say that publicly. You can't put that out there publicly. You are lighting a match and throwing it on a pile of oil drums that also have gasoline on them. You just can't make that type of a statement to the media so that your players get wind of it. And to the surprise of no one, there are reports that the Dallas Stars players were pretty unhappy about how that all went down. And not only the Oettinger situation, but other situations that occurred during the course of that series and in the playoffs against everybody. So you got unhappy players. You also have DeBoer stepping into what I like to call the firing zone, because he has 1 year left on his deal, which means that, look, coaches get fired in that 1 year left realm all the time. Coaches get fired with more money on their contracts. Just ask Dean Evison. But especially when you get to 1 year remaining on your deal, you are prime if anything goes wrong, especially if you're a team that has playoff aspirations. If anything goes wrong, you are in prime territory to have your parachute clipped as you are pushed out of the airplane. And not only that, but Kevin Weeks, who covers the NHL for ESPN as well as other outlets, he tends to, if he's in a location, that usually means that there's some news associated with that location. And earlier this week, he tweeted out a picture of the Dallas Stars home arena. Now, haven't seen anything that has come out since, but there appears to be a little smoke rising from the old Dallas Stars headquarters. And that's just the start of it. Look at the books for the Dallas Stars. The Dallas Stars have $4.9 million of projected cap space. They have 16 players on their active roster. So $4.9 million, and you've got 7 roster spots to fill. You don't necessarily need a third goalie, at least at this point. Okay, fine. But listen to these names that are all free agents and are going to be priced out unless they take massive, massive pay cuts. Jamie Benn is an unrestricted free agent. Matt Duchene is an unrestricted free agent. Evgeny Dadonov, Mikhail Granlund, Colin Blackwell, all unrestricted free agents. Maverick Bork is a restricted free agent, so you could sign him to a shorter bridge deal, but my math isn't super good. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 forwards on the roster right now. Last I checked, you need 12 to field a full team. You have $5 million of available cap space. That's not even counting the defense, where you currently have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rostered players. Now, Cody Ceci is not one that Dallas is going to shed too much tears over because he, frankly, was abysmally bad in the postseason. So that's not a spot that you're going to be too upset to have to replace. But you still have to find a way to replace said player. And you, again, have $5 million in available cap space to be able to do it. Oh, and guess what? Mason Marchment is an unrestricted free agent after this season is done. Now, $4.5 million is his salary. So Marchment is more of a, second tier player for that Dallas team. He's obviously not one of your top players, but he's still an important piece for that roster. Jason Robertson is a restricted free agent. He is arbitration eligible come next season, but they need some money. Dallas needs some money. And so here comes this report that Jason Robertson is potentially on the block. And an article written for the Dallas Morning News by Leah Asimakopoulos, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Robertson will likely expect a significant raise, closer to what other top-line forwards like Hintz, $8.45 million, and Rantanen, $12 million make. If the Stars don't think they can or aren't willing to afford him at that price, they may be better off testing the trade market to recoup some of the 3 first-round draft picks they sent away ahead of the trade deadline this year. They could also use the cap space with just $5 million to sign 6 players this offseason. In addition to contractual issues, Robertson's game isn't as layered as other forwards like Hintz or Wyatt Johnston. He's known as a pure goal scorer on the power play and in 5-on-5, but doesn't have as much versatility outside of that. Now, I'll be honest here. This is about a 0.01% chance of happening. But Jason Robertson is a compelling case here. Jason Robertson, when I heard that he was available, my ears perked up because he fixes glaring issues on this roster. The cost would be astronomical. There's no guarantee that you'd be able to put him on the roster beyond this season. But the fact that he's a restricted free agent next year is something that's the parachute. That's the safety parachute if you're not able to work out a long-term deal. And if you aren't, then you could say to some other team that has big playoff aspirations, hey, what do you think about Jason Robertson? I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. Is the defense an issue? Sure. It certainly is. But the thing that jumps out to me is the 7.1 offensive point shares in 82 games this past season. His floor as a player the last 4 seasons, his floor was 79 points in 74 games in 2021-2022 as a 22-year-old. He's played all 82 games the last 3 years. I know he got injured and missed the first round of the playoffs this year. Outside of that, 0 injury concerns. He has 41, 46, 29, 35 goals the last 4 seasons. 79, 109, 80, and 80 points in that same span. He's a pure wing. He has taken 200 plus shots on goal over the last 4 seasons, and his shooting percentage has never been lower than 12.6%. It was 16.6% this past season. I'm not saying that this is even remotely possible. And honestly, I'm sure there will be some that will be annoyed by the fact that we're looking into dream scenarios. But that is not a possibility that we have really entertained much here at Locked On Wild. Is a player who you bring in for a year to kind of see how it goes. And if you aren't able to keep that player around longer, you do what the Hurricanes did with Mikko Rantanen at the trade deadline. And then you end up with Logan Stankoven, who's going to be a pretty dang good player for the Hurricanes down the stretch. Did it cost him Marty Necas? Yeah. Yes, it did. So it's not to say that they didn't give up something. But this, I think, and there would be much more that you'd have to add. I don't even know if the Wilds would be comfortable paying the asking price. But we talk about these big swings that we want to see this Wild team take to vault themselves up to the top of the ladder. That's one. That's a big swing. That's a guy that's 25 years old, and I am probably not going to be able to sleep tonight thinking about the possibilities having Robertson on one side and Kaprizov on the other. Again, it's a pipe dream, but big thinking. A way to show Kirill Kaprizov, hey, we're in it to win it. If there is even a shred of truth to this, you have to make the call. You have to at least make the call to see how serious Dallas is on this. And I know it's a division rival, so if you were to trade a player like, say, Marco Rossi to Dallas as part of that deal, you could end up being bit in the rear end by that trade for years to come. But that at the top of your lineup, nightmare fuel. I'm just saying. It's, we've talked about like the Tage Thompson being a big swing as well. This is right in that same category. So ultimately, again, 0.01% that this happens. But if he is available, you have to make the call. You have to make the call. Now we're going to hop from that to a player that I hope, if he calls the Minnesota Wild, I hope the Wild do not pick up. We'll talk about Jonathan Toews as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. And if you are looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious, crack into a great source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving is 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. I now have a Tupperware container that is constantly full of Wonderful Pistachios on my coffee table at all times. If I am in the need of a little snack while I'm sifting through Netflix, waiting for the Stanley Cup final to get underway, I can have 3-4 handfuls and not feel guilty about just snacking away, because I know that I'm getting a great source of protein and other great nutrients as well. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Just as a heads up for the listeners, my schedule is going to be borderline insane over the next few days. Thanks to all this rain, all of the section and state baseball and softball playoffs have been pushed back. So now they are going to try to get them in over the course of tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. So you'll probably be getting episodes on the later end of the timeline, but we'll try to get them to you as early as we can. And we got a couple more weeks, and then we're back to normal schedule. So appreciate everybody's patience. I teased that there's a player who is working his way back after 2 years off that now wants to get back into the NHL. He is a Minnesota Wild killer who wasn't back in the early 2000s. Jonathan Toews, who last played with the Chicago Blackhawks in the 2022-2023 season. He's 37, and he obviously stepped away due to some significant health issues that he feels like he has worked his way back from. And the journey of Jonathan Toews to get to this point is a fascinating one. If you aren't aware of all the things that he has gone through, looked heavily into natural medicines and remedies to try to heal what is widely believed to be long COVID. And he feels like he is ready to come back and ready to play a role on some team throughout the NHL. And I personally hope that if the phone call comes to gauge interest as to if the Minnesota Wild would be interested, I hope the phone gets hung up. And here's why. Because Jonathan Toews is 37 years old and he hasn't played in the NHL in 2 years. Period. Point blank. End of sentence. Toews, for his career, wins faceoffs at a 57.3% clip. I like that. He has just a decorated playoff career. He's won Stanley Cups before. He has 26 playoff goals in 82 playoff games. Scratch that. He's got 43 goals in 137 playoff games, but 114 points in 137 playoff games. His 82-game playoff average is 26 goals and 68 assists. He has 425 goals in 15 years. His 82-game average is 33 goals and 76 points over 82 games. But he's not that player. He's not that guy anymore. He is going to go to some team as a fourth-line guy who will spend some time in the press box to make sure that his body is able to keep up with getting back to the rigors of a full NHL season, assuming he even makes the roster. And so I just I'm out. There is no scenario in which I even entertain this if I'm the Minnesota Wild. The leadership angle, I don't know. The Wild have gone that route before. It doesn't seem to really make that big of a difference. And like you would be adding a guy into the mix who is just going to cause more questions and confusion as to his role compared to other players. So I am emphatically, absolutely 100% zero out on Jonathan Toews. Go to Tampa Bay. Go to Florida. Go to Edmonton. I don't care. But if I am the general manager of the Minnesota Wild and that call comes through from his agent gauging interest, and if the Wild would be interested in making an offer, click. Move on to the next. Just like this is the same, it's a similar argument that has been raging in Minnesota Wild circles over the last 24 hours since Marcus Johansson re-upped with the Minnesota Wild. Is at what point do diminished skills sink below potential for a young player? And at what cost is that veteran leadership worth? What is the benefits for, especially if those players don't perform? What's the benefit of having those guys on the roster if they don't perform and they are just taking up space? Which leads me to my final point for today's episode that we're going to hash out in the final segment. Having a Stanley Cup winner on the roster, does it make that much of an impact? We'll discuss as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We are at 3,390 subscribers on YouTube. Appreciate all those who have subscribed and everybody that makes this as fun of a show to host as it is. I want to just finish because this is always an interesting topic to me. We know, and my point is not to further savage the Minnesota Wild leadership group of this team that has not gotten out of the postseason, not gotten out of the first round in the last 10 years, because we've done plenty of that. But what I am curious about is we've seen this from Bill Guerin over the last couple of years, is you need to go out and get a guy that has experience in the Stanley Cup playoffs, that can show the rest of the roster the ropes. Show them how it's done. This was basically the entire reason that Pat Maroon was acquired a couple of seasons ago. He was acquired to bring winning pedigree to the roster and to provide some fourth-line toughness. And it didn't work. That was the season that Dean Evason got fired. Maroon got traded to Boston. And so I think this idea that you need to have players that have the playoff experience to show you how it's done, it depends on the player. It depends on who you get to be able to show through their actions the rest of your roster. Pat Maroon obviously played a big role in the St. Louis Blues and the Tampa Bay Lightning, winning their Stanley Cups. Maroon was a pretty key piece for the Tampa Bay Lightning when he went there. But he wasn't that guy anymore. When he got to the Minnesota Wild, he wasn't that type of player. And so you go from being able to show players how it's done through your actions to telling them, well, yeah, this is what I would do in this situation, but you're not that guy anymore. I think back to 3 years ago when the season got off to a rough start. Bill Guerin goes out and gets Ryan Reeves to restore order and to bring kind of that playoff mentality to the roster. And Ryan Reeves, he played for the Vegas Golden Knights. He's bounced around a few different places. But when he got to Minnesota, he wasn't that guy anymore. He wasn't that same player that could provide through his actions. Do as I do, follow along as I do it. I'll show you the way and show you what needs to be done. He wasn't that guy when he came to the Minnesota Wild. Marc-Andre Fleury, another example, Stanley Cup winner with the Pittsburgh Penguins, had some great postseason runs, even with the Vegas Golden Knights. He was the goalie that went up against Cam Talbot in the first playoff series in which I started covering the Minnesota Wild through Locked On Wild. Marc-Andre Fleury was the goalie in that first round series. But when he got to Minnesota, he wasn't that guy anymore. Now, Fleury obviously has had a major impact on players on the roster. Just ask Brock Faber about that. Had a massive impact on this roster. So Fleury is maybe the exception to what I'm saying, but I think if you are going to add Stanley Cup pedigree to your team, you just look at how difficult it is to win the Stanley Cup, to get to the Stanley Cup final. But Florida has grabbed a bunch of just very, very tough-nosed bruisers that have led them back to this point. And Corey Perry has just turned getting to the Stanley Cup final into his job, basically. So I think not only do you need to have players to be able to show you the way, but I think the postseason just comes down to, once again, when the going gets tough, when somebody needs to make a play, somebody just has to step up and do it. And against the Vegas Golden Knights, there were plenty of opportunities for different players to step up and make plays. Some did, some didn't. And whether you rise to the occasion or whether the lights are too bright, it's got to be the top level guys. It's got to be those top end guys that bring you to the promised land. That's why the Oilers are back. They've gotten back to the Stanley Cup final on the backs of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, but they've had those key pieces of support lower in the lineup. For the Florida Panthers, Barkov, Bennett, Reinhart, Tkachuk, but they've also had the players lower in the lineup that have stepped up to be able to get it done. The Florida Panthers had 17 different players score a goal for them at one point in this postseason. You had a guy like Brad Marchand. Now, there's a good example of adding playoff pedigree to your roster that worked. But Marchand, in the series against the Toronto Maple Leafs, he led the team in points. So he's productive, still plenty productive. And you look at some of these Cup pedigree ads that the Wild have done over the last few years, they've all been like fourth line guys. So really the only thing that they can show you lead by example is going and punching somebody's face into the glass. And I think if we've seen anything from this postseason, it's that you have to have multiple lines that can consistently attack and just a list of players that when you need a goal can step up and get it done. Can't be 2 or 3 guys. It's got to be a large portion of the roster that are capable of performing in those moments. And this is why the Minnesota Wilds are still on the 10-year drought, is when the opportunities present themselves to make plays, you just got to do it. It's, it's not just the middle of the lineup guys. It's been the top line guys before. Matt Boldy started his postseason career on the quiet side. He was fantastic in this past postseason, but he, like Kirill Kaprizov, once the Vegas Golden Knights started adjusting to what that top line was doing, they went quiet. And then Ryan Hartman stepped up to try to fill some of that gap. But nobody else really did. So I think having players that know what it takes to get to the Stanley Cup playoffs and what it takes to get it done in the playoffs depends entirely on the type of player you're adding. A Brad Marchand goes a long way, but he can be a leader in the locker room, but he also is a leader by his play on the ice. So it's interesting that we haven't heard any of that yet from the Minnesota Wild. I don't know that we will, but it's just something that I thought was interesting. And just looking back at the players that have been brought in to try to provide that hasn't really worked out. So it'll be interesting to see how this series goes between the Panthers and the Oilers. We'll, of course, keep you updated on it as the series unfolds. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. And make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day.